So I just am going to start with a few housekeeping things. We're going to do this in a panel type format. So we'll have each of our panelists spend some time speaking to their particular areas. And then if you have a question, if you could please put it into the chat feature, we will make certain to address questions at the end of everybody's period of time to talk about their particular issues and areas of expertise. And then we also have some conversation starters for our panelists today. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Benny Lacayo. Benny is a community organizer and for the Reentry Organization. Welcome back here in Missoula. And he is a leader on the Missoula Works Get It Done crew, which assists people with barriers to employment. So welcome, Benny. Thank you for joining us today. We also have Dave Wilkes. Dave, in addition to being the Montana Innocence Project's 7 freed clients, Dave is an artist and a business person and a community advocate for mental health, in addition to the cause of unjust convictions. And so we're super happy to have Dave here with us today. Welcome, Dave. And last but not least, we have Jenea Buhler. Jenea, in addition to being a licensed clinical social work candidate and addiction counseling licensee candidate based right here in Missoula, is also a Reiki master, which is very cool. I did not know that about you, actually, Jenea. So that's really, really awesome. And I will just say that my personal interaction with Jenea, it was in her work, specifically working with women's reentry program based here in Missoula. And so I'm really excited to have you here today, Jenea. Welcome. I'm excited to get this conversation underway. So I will kick it off by turning it over to Benny, and Benny's going to speak to us a little bit about, as I said, his area of expertise and the work that he does.
Awesome, thank you. Hello, once again, my name is Benny Lacayo. My pronouns are he, him. I am the community organizer for Welcome Back, and what we do at Welcome Back is we not only give service, offer service as far as peer support, mentorship, housing advocacy. You know, we are working, but because of COVID, it's tough. We're working directly with MSP on folks that are coming to Missoula on their reentry and coordinating with them prior to them coming. So when they get here, they're not just homeless, you know. And also part of the Get It Done crew, I work with guys and gals that get out of prison, have a hard time finding job placement because of their criminal history. You know, and so we put them to work, you know, and sometimes what happens is in the job place, jobs don't like you missing, right? You have to be at work, they count on you. We understand that returning citizens sometimes have to go to court, sometimes have to meet with their PO, sometimes there's treatment involved, you know, and so we're very flexible with those issues and understanding that. And real quick, if y'all don't mind, before I finish, I would just like to do a small, quick prayer for the children that were innocent children that were lost at the boarding schools. And I just say, Aho, Creator, Aho, Grandfather, just come before you in prayer for these children. I come before you for the families that were affected by these boarding schools. I ask for healing. I ask for justice. I ask for peace. Aho, thank you. Yeah, so thank you. That's pretty much what I do.
Thank you for that, Benny. For those who may not be aware, yesterday, September 30th, is Orange Shirt Day in recognition of those who suffered in residential boarding schools, Indigenous peoples who suffered in residential boarding schools, and the families that survived those times as well. So I just want to introduce again and ask Dave Wilkes. Dave, if you could share with us your experience and what has you here with us today.
Well, so I was convicted back in 2009 of shaking my son Gabriel to death. Wasn't the case, but I didn't find out until about 4 years inside what actually had happened. And, you know, again, thanks to the Innocence Project and all the experts. And I mean, there was a ton of people that stepped up that didn't have to step up for me. They stepped up, they put their time in, and I still don't have quite a clear picture of what actually happened to my son. I mean, we know that I didn't do it. I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now if that was the case. But, you know, again, you know, thanks to the Innocence Project and all their experts and everybody that had stepped up. That's basically why I'm here, is to not only advocate for the Innocence Project and, you know, any of the people that have went through the shaken baby syndrome, you know, and come to find out later on that they didn't do it, because no parent should ever have to go through that, I don't believe. Aside from that, I'm not sure what else to say.
Thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate you sharing that with us, and we'll learn a little bit more about the background on your case through some of our questions. Jenea, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about yourself and what your areas of expertise are, what brings you here.
Unmute. Okay. It told me. Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, my name is Jenea Buhler, and currently I am a licensed clinical social worker candidate, and also a candidate working towards my LAC, so my license in addiction counseling. And I actually am about halfway through my license to become a licensed clinical social worker. However, I am doing that in a private practice. So currently I work in private practice. I have a passion for reentry. It's, I have a long family history of incarceration, which was originally what really got me interested in working in reentry. I myself actually I've been in recovery for 18 years, and I started my career in social work about 15 years ago. And I started working with children with low-income families. And what I found was that a lot of those families had the experience of incarceration. And most of the work that I've done in social work has been with low-income families, and definitely there is a disproportionate number of families who are low income that have experienced incarceration. Then in 2018, I got my master's degree in social work to become a therapist, and I started working with Word, and we did a gap analysis on like what was needed in the community, and what we found was that there was a huge need for reentry for women in the Missoula community. And so I did research on what that looked like and built a reentry program that was specific to women in Missoula. And then when Word closed, I started working with Crosswinds. What then was Crosswinds Sober Living, and we turned it into Crosswinds Recovery. And we built a primarily reentry program there. And I was the program director and created their clinical piece. And I left there to just work in private practice. I do currently work with some folks who have experienced incarceration. And I have a sliding scale fee so that I can offer services to people who can't necessarily afford to see me. So and also I have been a part of Partners for Reintegration for about 4 years, I think. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a local coalition that's made up of agencies that work with people who are reentering into the community, and just kind of looking at all those services and how they can be coordinated and how we can best serve people who are reentering. So that is my area of expertise.
Thank you so much, Jenea. And so I will just share that the Montana Innocence Project has been also sitting at the table with Partners for Reintegration, and my time with the project, which I just came on as executive director of the project in January of 2020, and I was sort of drinking from the fire hose, so to speak, and partners, including Jana, had sort of brought me in and really got me up to speed. And there's some amazing work that's being done in the community, and I'm really grateful for this community of advocates in this space. So I have a few questions that I want to ask of our panelists here today, and then I just want to encourage, if you have additional questions for any of them or all of them, to just put them into the chat, and we will address them as they come rolling in. My first question is for Benny. Benny, what are some of the current reentry issues facing Montanans, and how do you think they could be remedied?
Awesome, thank you. You know, I could start with the saying, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I could also talk about how the current system is about retribution. It's punishment inflicted on someone for something they did wrong. It's a revengeful system. There is this psychiatrist, his name is James Gilligan, and he said, the retribution justice system is the most powerful stimulant of violence that we have yet discovered. I could talk about how more than half victims don't report their crimes because they don't believe the system is gonna help them and bring justice. I could talk about the problems about and this was in 2018, so I'm sure the statistics are even higher, that in the US, there are 2.2 million people behind bars and over 5 million on probation and parole. I could talk about, if laws really change things, then the war on drugs would be over. But if we get down, like, working on the Get It Done crew, I work with guys and gals, you know, and one of the things we do is lawn care. And for us to get rid of those weeds, the only way to get rid of a weed is to take it at its root. That means we have to go under the dirt. We have to go beyond what we see to those things that we don't see that are still there. And that is the biggest problem with the system, is there's zero accountability when someone inflicts pain on someone. Example, someone gets arrested for a crime. The first thing they tell you is, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. So imagine someone that has been victimized. You know, think about a time when you've been hurt. Think about a time when someone's done injustice to you. I know one of the biggest things that I want to hear when someone hurts me is them being accountable for their actions, you know, and taking responsibility for those actions and trying to make things right. But we live in a system that doesn't want that. We live in a system that just wants to imprison people and use them for cheap labor. We live in a system that does not want to face the reality and have those hard questions and have those answers. For instance, a victim during the time of someone being prosecuted, there's usually only 2 times when they speak out, and that's usually behind closed doors. And then the other is when someone is being sentenced. There's no healing for that person. If the system really wants to heal people, then we need to have those hard conversations. We need to put, our insecurities, our fears aside and say, hey, let's figure this out as a community. Let's come together as a people and truly figure out what's wrong here. I was on a team, an anti-racist task force, and I was on this team for about 5 months. And there came a point where my criminal history was in conflict to what they believed. And they didn't see me for who I am today. They didn't see me for what I stood today. They seen me for my crime. They seen me for my past. And so we were supposed to have this hard conversation. How do we make this place safe so that you can still be involved and have a voice? The day of that conversation, they said, oh, Mr. Lacayo, we appreciate the input you've been, but because of your past, we will side with the victim. And that's the biggest problem with our system today, is we bring division between people. We bring division between someone that has wronged someone and someone that has been wronged. I know a gentleman, and sometimes the victim doesn't even get to have the chance to say, I want to speak to this person. I want to know why they hurt me. I know of a family that I'm thinking of in particular right now. And the victim wants to speak to the person that hurt them and have answers, being answered. But the system says no. And even his parole officer said, I will make sure it will be my duty that you will never have contact with that person. And not even that person's family. And that is like the biggest problem with our system. I'm looking at recidivism. And the biggest reason why I believe people recidivism and reoffend is the lack of accountability. I was speaking to a man the other day, and I see this a lot in a lot of people that are returning citizens, is they don't take accountability for what they have done. And the system has allowed that, because if you speak up and say, yes, I did this, then you know what? We're going to add another life sentence. We're going to add another 20 years. So it makes people not want to come out, and it doesn't allow them to get healed. When something happens like this, both parties need healing. And healing can come when you are accountable for your actions and you look at that person that you have hurt and you see the pain that they have gone through and what they're going through and seeing the effects of that. I really believe if we change and take more accountability for our actions, there will be less recidivism, to crimes. I'm looking at this, like I mentioned, there's this gentleman, and he drank he drank, and he said, well, I didn't get too drunk. but his POs found out about it. And his attitude was, and because of that, he had to now do drug treatment. He had to go visit the PO more often, and those were during work times. And he was upset and mad at the parole officer because he had to do all this stuff. And he's like, how do you expect me to pay all my fines? How do you expect me to do this when I can't go to work? And I told him straight out, bro, you wouldn't be in this position if you didn't do what you did. And you need to take accountability for your actions. And sometimes another issue is we, the way the system is, we inflict pain on these people, and we get upset, you know, with the drug addictions and stuff. And drug addictions are usually just a byproduct of something else that is going on inside of them. And we don't look at those issues, and we don't face those issues. And that's where we need to start, is accountability and those hard conversations. You know, I know, like, for instance, someone upsets me and then I get a text from them. The last thing I want to do is talk to them. You know, I'll ghost them because there's that fear inside of me that doesn't want to deal with those issues. And so accountability.
So I appreciate hearing that. It sounds to me like there are a number of barriers in the current system that provide challenges for individuals who have been convicted of a crime that they did commit, and it really puts up some barriers and additional challenges for healing for everybody, victims, offenders, the community. I really appreciate hearing that perspective, Benny. My next question is for Dave. And Dave, this is the flip side of things, right? When you are innocent of the crime that you have been convicted of and wrongfully incarcerated, what are the unique challenges that innocent people face when returning to their lives after a wrongful incarceration?
Okay, well, I appreciate the question. And again, thank you all for having me over here. So first off, they don't necessarily get to return to their lives. You know, I mean, whatever life you knew before you went inside, it's gone. It's done changed. And it's done changed in a heartbeat. I mean, just that quick. What I mean is their lives have been interrupted by this heinous freight train of deceit and lies. And then their family is dragged into the collateral damage that comes out. Unique challenges, no home to go to, unless you have a family that's willing to go above and beyond, such as mine has, which again, I mean, I'm blown away how far my family had to go. I mean, they couldn't afford my legal fees and this and that, but they helped me out while I was inside. And they've continued to help me once I got back out, you know, and once all this, you know, was found out. They don't have a job. Yeah, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm reading out of my notebook right now. I took about 4 pages to write all this down. They've lost everything, including any kind of community respect they've had, if they ever had it. Loss of family, friends, anything and everything they knew before they went inside. So returning to a life as you knew it or have known, it's going to change, including technology, landmarks, etc. If they're convicted of a murder, as I was, well, then you have to wonder, is everyone thinking I actually did this? I remember writing my brother Tony probably, I don't know, it might have been 6 months, it might have been a year after I went inside, and he had gotten busy with the work he was doing, you know, supporting his family and this and that. And he's a busy man. He works for Boeing. He didn't get back to my letter in about a month and a half, and apologized profusely for it. But it had me wondering, because, okay, wait a minute now, he hasn't gotten back, you know, and I'm thinking, wait, you know, does he actually think I did this? Any of your friends that you had, anybody that you knew in the community, and I knew a lot of people in Missoula. I used to play the band scene there years ago. I ran a tattoo shop in Whitefish years ago. And so, I mean, I knew people clean from the Canadian border all the way south, and, you know, points west, Spokane, you know, this and that. I mean, I knew a lot of people over there. So I'm thinking the whole time I'm down, I'm thinking, man, these people, they can't believe that I would actually do something like this. And so, I mean, it gets inside your head in a bad way. Employers, they don't want to hire a murderer, especially in a lot of workplaces today, considering workplace violence. And, you know, somebody might, they might wig out, whatever, you know, and so they don't want to deal with that fallout. It makes it hard to date anybody or really have any kind of relationship, because, I mean, especially with a murder, I mean, a murderer being convicted of a murder, especially a child, it's a very, not only is it a tragic thing, but it's also, it's very public, you know, and so you end up wearing this jacket that you weren't meant to wear. And, you know, so you're having to either over-explain yourself once you get into a relationship or you're speaking with anybody, or you become over-defensive. My brother Tony's mentioned that to me a few times too. You know, we'll be talking and you know, I'll you know, not come unglued per se, but he says that I tend to over-explain myself a little too much now. And that wasn't the case before. You know, I mean, it wasn't like I'd go about my daily business and just on to the next, but, you know, it's a matter of now I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And so you tend to over-accommodate everything, you know, including any kind of self-defense that you're trying to do or whatever, you know, whatever's going on up here. So again, I mean, like I said, it makes it hard to date anybody, have any kind of relationship, whether it be with family, friends, or you know, anything after the fact. And like I said, you end up wearing this jacket. It basically puts a cease and desist on your whole life to a certain degree. And that'll answer that question, I guess.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. My next question is for Jenea. Jenea, you've assisted many women in returning to their communities, their families, et cetera, after incarceration. What are the unique challenges of women facing reentry?
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Well, when I was working at Word, we actually brought together a group of women who had all experienced incarceration and asked them exactly those questions, or that question. And what we really found is that, I mean, some of the things that we all know, like women actually generally take lower wage paying jobs. So when women are coming out of incarceration, already women are taking lower paying jobs, but when they have like a felony history or something on their record, then they are more likely to, I mean, women generally will just take any job that they can get. And often they end up in situations in their employment when they're, usually in some sort of situation where they're being taken advantage of, they're being, verbally abused, sometimes sexually assaulted. So women face a lot of those things when they come out of incarceration and feel like they don't really have a voice. And often women say that when they come out of incarceration, they feel like they have to take whatever they can get. And they think that a lot of times that they deserve that. So the other thing that women face is that a lot of women who are incarcerated come out and they have been removed from their children, or their children have been removed from them. And so Sometimes families will be reunited. And so if that's the case, then women are facing being reunited with their children and having to go through all of the different attachment wounding and repair that happens when they're separated from their children, learning how to come from a place where they're being told everything that they need to do every day to trying to raise children. Which, you know, just coming out of incarceration, like when Dave was speaking, those challenges that he spoke of, I think are challenges that that also a lot of people who've been incarcerated face. There definitely are some that are like specific to his situation, but some of them are like, you know, time standing still, and it's like, or for you, time standing still, but coming out and the whole world is different, and so. It's already really overwhelming to come out of prison and out into the world. Everything is heightened. It's hard to go into the grocery store. It's hard to interact with people. And then women are then getting their children back. And anyone who's a parent knows that already that's difficult. And so it's just, you know, basically the stacking of those things. The other thing is that women, I think it's about 80% of women, or it was when I was researching it a few years ago, that 80% of women who are incarcerated have trauma histories, suffering either physical or sexual abuse or both. And so when women are coming out of incarceration, they're dealing with all of that overstimulation and those things I just mentioned. And on top of it are often dealing with mental health, PTSD, a lot of those kinds of issues. And also oftentimes addiction plays into that as well. And so and I wouldn't say that that's necessarily unique to women, but women do have a higher percentage of reported trauma histories as far as incarceration goes. Let's see, I'm trying to think of what else. I would say that really those are the biggest challenges that are specific to women.
So it sounds, Jenea, like there are some commonalities, certainly, but that there might be heightened numbers or percentages that we're seeing of certain issues over others.
Yes, and also, you know, I know that in the Missoula community, and part of the reason that I was, that I had built a reentry program that was specific to women is that women often don't feel comfortable going out into the community and connecting with groups that, you know, maybe like Welcome Back, where there are often a lot of men there. And I have had women who have been willing to go to those kinds of groups and stuff, but women actually have really said that what they want is women-specific support and places where they can go that they feel safe. Because again, often they have had trauma that's been perpetrated by men. And even if it is a safe place for them to go, it doesn't feel safe when you have PTSD that hasn't been worked through. So.
I know one of the things that we hear in the Innocence Network is that women often underreport some of the traumatic experiences that have happened to them, that they themselves, and we know this to be true, that often individuals who end up incarcerated have been victims themselves of violence and trauma and those kinds of things. And we see in the Innocence Network that the number of women who will even come forward to say, I am innocent of a crime, is far, far below that of men. And often what is cited is this real feeling like nobody was going to believe me to begin with, let alone now I'm incarcerated. You know, I've been convicted of something, I'm incarcerated. So the chances of somebody believing me now are less than zero.
Right.
So I now have a question for Benny. And Benny, you know, some of the things that you were touching on, I believe earlier in the first question, relates to this concept of restorative justice, or this practice of restorative justice. You personally are an advocate for restorative justice, and I'm just hoping that you can explain what that is and how you feel that practicing it could possibly improve the reentry process in our communities.
Absolutely. Thank you. There's like three main keys. And just for the record, I am no expert. I'm still learning, you know, and this is a journey that I'm on. And so, yeah, those three key principles is crime causes harm, and justice should be focused on repairing that harm. The people most affected by that crime should be able to participate in the rectification of such harm. And then the third is the responsibility of the government is to maintain order, and of the community to build, and for the community to build peace. And there's a little process. The first step is inclusion. Restorative justice processes are more inclusive than the traditional criminal processes. They actively invite all affected parties, victims, offenders, committee members to participate in the resolution of this crime. Then there's an encounter. The restorative justice places a high value on having the victim and offender encounter one another. This encounter might be done directly or indirectly, sometimes through, it could be through video, it could be through audio, it could be through writing. Then there's the amend part. Restorative justice seeks to repair the harm done by crime. Whenever possible, this repair should be done by the persons responsible for the harm. That is why restorative justice values efforts by offenders to make amends. A lot of times in that, it could be there's different forms of letters. Also, someone vandalizes something, repairing of that vandalism, you know, is a small example. And then there's reintegration. Crime causes injuries. It also can result in both the victim and the offender experiencing stigmatization. Therefore, restorative justice places a high value on the reintegration of the victim and of the offender. The goal is to have them become whole, contributing members of their community. I know folks that have been offended, you know, and have been hurt, and sometimes they take responsibility for that hurt that was caused on them, and they carry that shame. And this process allows them to help get rid of that shame, get rid of that guilt, so they're able to have that healing, you know. And also when someone offends, there's healing that they need to go through, you know, because they cause pain. You know, I know the majority of folks, sometimes it's when there's an offense, it's like, why did I do that? How, you know, why, what was wrong with me? You know, what was the reasons for me doing this? You know, and that process allows healing for those things, you know. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell, you know. But I do want to also say that the way that things are right now, a lot of us put that pressure on resolving crime and resolving pain and harm. We put it on the prosecutor. We put it on the correctional administrative. We put it on legislators. We put it on the court system. But this is a community problem. This is a problem that could only be fixed when us as a community, when Randy, when Amy, when Jenea, when May, when we all say, you know what, I want to be a part of this conversation. I want to be a part of those hard conversations, you know, and actually taking responsibility for our roles. Everyone in this room, everyone in this state has a responsibility to take part, you know, in this healing process. so that the person that has been victimized can have true healing and grow and learn. And the person that commits this such crime can also have healing and become a productive member of society. So it takes all of us for this to work.
Thank you, Benny. I appreciate that. I just want to touch on something that I heard Benny say, and that's, you know, identifying all of the different players in the criminal legal system, and putting sort of apportionment or weight in one area more than another. I think that is one of the things that allows individuals and sometimes whole branches of government to push off, to say the responsibility is over here, oh no, wait, it's over here, when the reality is we all, as you had said, Benny, we all share in this responsibility to ensure that the criminal legal system is fair and accurate, and that the work that we are all doing together, because there is no there's no siloing here. We're all interconnected, and all the pieces affect another part of not just the system, but of our communities. And we will not get to a place of justice unless we are taking a look at it in this holistic way. And so, you know, Dave, my next question is for you, and we have two sort of focuses here. One is reentry. A part of reentry is sometimes those supports that come after release. Now, if you are an offender and you've served your time and now you're released, there are some resources that are available to you. They're not perfect, and they're not grand in a way of abundance. But if you are actually innocent of the crime and found to be innocent of the crime that you were accused, convicted, and incarcerated for, many times there's nothing available. There's no compensation. As Dave had mentioned, unless you have family that are willing to sort of go above and beyond and bring you back in, there's often not even a place to live. You kind of walk out, and you're lucky if you got the clothes that are on your back and little else. So, Dave, while no amount of money can give innocent people their time back or make them completely whole, there is some compensation that is needed to assist freed people in rebuilding their lives. Why is it important to compensate the wrongfully convicted? And what are some of the components of compensation that you feel could be of most value or most helpful in addition to actual financial compensation?
Okay, thank you, Amy. So the reason I feel it's important to compensate the wrongfully convicted, first off, it wasn't their fault, okay? Whether it be people not doing their jobs, or someone or many someone's having nefarious or political, whatever the reasoning behind it was, the people upholding our laws and our justice system, they have a duty to uphold the law first and foremost. When that duty isn't upheld for whatever reason, you just don't throw said person under the bus for whatever you're not doing or willing to do. The system, these people that take these jobs, whether it be a prosecutor or a judge or anybody, I mean, as far as political office or public office, from what I know, they have to swear by these oaths on a Bible, okay? And yet, what do? How would they feel if it was done to them and their families? You know, I mean, there's going to be tremendous fallout from that, especially, you know, if they have some kind of political backing, or, you know, if they're well known in the community, this and that. That's the first part of my answer. The second part is the mental health aspect. It's important for me to touch on this just momentarily, because no family should ever have to deal with the fallout, the stressors, the stresses, inner workings of whether it be my mind or anybody else's, when it was our system that created this to begin with. You know, as Benny was saying earlier, you know, I mean, we all have to be accountable in some way, all of us, whether it be the voters or the people within the system, but we all have to be accountable. Well, a lot of times it seems to happen that, okay, said people that do said crime or said whatever, it's our families that have to deal with this fallout eventually, you know, and that's not fair to them, you know. So then it's that, or you end up taking it out on yourself. I can speak from personal experience. It's not like I'm taking anything out of myself, but I will run from my family because I don't want to have them see me hurt. You know, I'll take off on a drive or whatever, or, you know, try to get into my music, you know, try to get, not necessarily inside my mind, but so I try to get away from the people that I love, which is the same people that helped me once I got back out. So again, it goes back to the whole mental health thing. The therapy, you know, therapy costs money. And again, a lot of us, you know, once we get back out, you show me anybody that wouldn't need therapy after this. I mean, and yeah, a lot of people have strong minds, but a lot of people, you know, they succumb to whatever stressors are going on, which again puts more stress on the family. Not a good thing. And not saying, you know, not saying anything, you know, I'm not saying this generalized, but, you know, some of us had a semblance of life before being wrongfully convicted. You know, I had a house, I had a family. Hello, are we still on? Okay. I lost video for a minute, sorry. So some of us had a semblance of life before being wrongfully convicted. The money awarded would be able to help some of us get back to whatever semblance of a life that was, depending on how many years we've had to do. And just to kind of end what I've written down here, no amount of money can replace my son Gabriel. No amount of money can fix, you know, not just what I've went through, but what Katie's went through, and other people that I knew between Crossroads Correction in Shelby and Deer Lodge and just, I mean, across, you know, not just across the U.S., but across the world. The money will help to alleviate some of the stressors. You know, but again, too, I mean, you know, you have to think about it. People are going to need therapy after this. I mean, heck, your therapist might need therapy, you know, after this, unfortunately. But, you know, again, no amount of money, it can't replace my son, Gabriel. That was my firstborn. That may be the last child I ever had. Kind of a nightmare. It can't replace my sister, Candace, that I lost while I was inside. It can't replace my brother-in-law, Jimmy, my adopted father, or anything else any of us have lost, including our semblance of self. And with that, I'll end my answer.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you sharing all of that. Emotional toll is unfathomable. I want to just touch very briefly in the realm of conversation on the different aspects of compensation legislation out there. We'll talk a little bit more about that after the panel closes as well, but just to make everyone aware, the state of Montana for years had compensation legislation on the books. Not only was it an unfunded compensation, but the actual only form of compensation was to come in the way of tuition assistance. And as you can imagine, if you come out and you're not even sure if you have somewhere to live, you have lost months, years of your life, and the kinds of connection and family and community, and you come out with the kind of trauma that we're talking about here. It might be a real heavy lift to think about, like, post-secondary education. So over the course of the last few years, the Montana Innocence Project, along with some of our community partners, have been working with the Montana legislature to bring real meaningful compensation to Montana exonerees and freed clients. And so we were successful in doing so to a certain extent in the last legislative session, meaning that there is now laws on the books that exonerees have the opportunity to seek actual financial compensation. A number of things were stripped out of that legislation in the 11th hour, including through the process. There had been a provision that would have provided for additional assistance with resources such as mental health resources, education, housing, and those types of things that would go above and beyond the actual monetary provision in the bill, and those were stripped away as well. So we will be going back in 2023 in full force, and we'll be looking to you all to join us in that fight. So my last formal question here is for Jenea. Jenea, what would you tell someone who is a returning loved one about where to start in the overwhelming process of reestablishing their lives outside of incarceration?
Yeah, I want to thank Dave for what you shared. Just, you know, it's a really heartbreaking story, and actually, and I guess, you know, that question actually relates to what you just shared as well, Amy, about the loss or them taking out the assistance for mental health and housing and those types of things from that financial compensation. Because I believe that you know, the place that people need to start when they return from incarceration is really at the basics. And so a lot of times you see people come out of incarceration. So when you're sitting in prison, it's really easy to think that you're going to get out and you're going to conquer the world. You know, people really actually have really high intentions of getting out and doing really well. They want to succeed. They want to, like, open businesses, and they want to be great to their families. And, you know, they want to do all of these amazing things. And I do believe that most people have the ability to do that, but then they come out into this world that, you know, again, has time for them stood still, and it's really overwhelming. And you know, they have, all of a sudden they have bills to pay, and if they even have a place to live. I mean, a lot of times the prisons release people to homelessness. And so people will come out of incarceration, and if you don't have a family to fall back on, you have nowhere to go. And my mother actually works at the Poverillo here, and the number of people who are dropped on the doorstep coming out of prison is pretty high. And so you know, ideally, and this is something that, you know, Partners for Reintegration has been working for a really long time to try to create some sort of a hub where people could go when they come out of incarceration, because the most important thing, I think, is finding an advocate who can help you navigate really those basic things, help you navigate, like, how are you going to find a place to live? How are you going to pay your rent? How are you going to find a job that is going to support you? How are you going to, because I'm with Dave, I think that mental health is one of the most important things. And actually, in incarceration, I mean, it really, we are incarcerating people for mental health issues. It's a medical issue. Most of the time when crimes are committed, it is because of mental health. And I would say that even in the cases of people who are wrongly convicted, like when you were saying that women often don't speak up for themselves, I would say that that is because of a mental health issue, probably histories of abuse and, you know, things that that have taught them that they don't really have a voice. And so I feel like there's really a lot that goes into it, but then also, you know, being wrongly convicted, the trauma that's inflicted on you, the trauma of being incarcerated, the trauma of people thinking that you've done something that you haven't, just, and also I can't even imagine you know, how that would feel inside and what a person does with that over time. And, you know, I really am a believer in the way that things really just like stick inside of us when we're not able to move through them. And so I think mental health is really important. So I would tell people to start at a place like, you know, Missoula Interfaith Collaborative, which is where Welcome Back is housed, does have some advocates. I know that in our program at Crosswinds, we set up to have everyone who came out of incarceration paired with an advocate who would, you know, we actually had a checklist for them that said, these are the things that you need to do for your first 2 weeks out. And also, you know, the first 2 weeks out of incarceration actually are the most fragile. That's actually the window where people are most likely to reoffend. And that's because it is so overwhelming. And so I think just finding someone that that you can talk to, someone who maybe like understands what you're going through, someone, you know, some kind of support to help you navigate the system and to, you know, just really understand all of the things that you're experiencing coming out of incarceration out into the world. Because I think it is hard for people who have never been in that situation to understand, although now, you know, with COVID, actually, I think that, you know, probably that helps people understand a little bit more, you know, the way that we have when everyone was quarantined, it caused so many problems in mental health that, you know, I mean, you can hardly find a therapist in Missoula right now because that like having been isolated. And then now when people are going back out into the world, they're finding that it's really hard for them. And so if you could imagine that on a much bigger scale, being incarcerated in a setting where like you're told what to do all the time, and you don't get to see the people that you love, you're really just like stuck in this place and held there really against your will. And so yeah, I just think starting with finding an agency that is supportive and sensitive to reentry issues, where there's an advocate or some kind of mental health support, some kind of like case management that can help walk you through all of the little steps. And it is actually disgusting to me that they would give a voucher for education, because I mean, that's really just like putting, you know, sticking, I mean, you know, when you can't even meet your basic needs to then go to school is really probably only going to make you end up, you know, doing way worse, honestly, not helpful at all. So that's all.
Thank you, Jenea. So I want to give a tremendous amount of thanks to our panelists. Y'all had a very heavy lift here because, you know, while the Montana Innocence Project, as our name indicates, we, you know, do the legal work and the advocacy for innocence issues. However, we also take a look at the criminal legal system writ large as it is and try to find the places where it is failing and it needs some reform, not only to prevent wrongful convictions, but also to just provide justice overall. And so we have, you know, while the topic is reentry and compensation, there's a very broad range of perspectives and voices here just among the three of you all, and I'm so greatly appreciative for all of you for doing such a beautiful job of bringing forward really important information and insights across that spectrum. Thank you so much. I also want to talk a little bit about I'm going to loop back to compensation at the state level for us. So we discussed that we now do have this compensation law in place. It is due to sunset in 2023, or I'm sorry, it's due to sunset by our next legislative session. And so not only will we need the advocacy just to keep it in place, but then of course to improve upon it. And so I would just encourage all of you who are here today, not only to make your voices heard in the next legislative session and over the course of this interim session, so that our representatives can hear these voices and perspectives and know how deeply important it is to everyone in this community, but also so that what we're looking at here is for a continuing robust conversation about the many aspects of not just compensation, but supports for our community members coming home. And we all benefit when we're able to have our community members come back to us and to live full and robust lives. That is just what it's all about, really and truly. And so I want to talk a little bit about a call to action for Wrongful Conviction Day. And this is a network-wide call to action. We have, you know, pretty recently been talking again about compensation at the federal level. And so there's the Justice for Exonerees Act, which was introduced by Representative Maxine Waters, representative out of California, would increase the annual amount of compensation for exonerees at the federal level to $70,000 a year. So to give some comparison here, we're looking at $60,000 a year annually in the state of Montana, and we had to fight really hard for that. This particular federal legislation would include an inflator to ensure that increases over time to that amount are consistent with the cost of living. While the federal level does not impact those who were wrongfully convicted in the state of Montana, well, at least not in Montana state courts, state legislatures do look to the federal laws for some guidance. They look to other states and they look to the federal laws for some guidance. And so this would, of course, bolster our, you know, argument and support that we really do need this meaningful level of actual financial compensation component to our state laws. And I just want to urge each and every one of you to write to your Congress, congressional representatives to support the passage of the Justice for Exonerees Act. Randy's going to be putting a link in the chat box that you can all, connect to learn about how you can go about doing that. And again, as I said, this is a network-wide call to action in support of Wrongful Conviction Day. Another reminder that we have at 6 p.m. tonight, now on Zoom. It originally was to be scheduled in person, but COVID has derailed so many of our best laid plans, and this one is no exception. So we have a now virtual rally. The fight continues for justice and accountability on Zoom from 6 to 7 p.m. And there's some more information about that. Randy will also put that link for you to join that webinar at 6 with us today. And one last link in there, if you're not already on our mailing list, we would love for you to be on our mailing list so that we can continue to provide you more action updates and make you aware of different events and goings on that we have in the community. Thank you again so much to our panelists. Thanks to each and every one of you who has joined us here today. Please do tell your friends and family. That's how things get done. So grateful for you all, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me too.
Dave, thanks for your story and for
Thank
Innocent
you,
Project.
Benny.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work in the community up there too, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank you, everybody, for all that you do.
Right. Have a wonderful weekend.